be a good surgeon, you have to have a bit of ego, I think, because you've got to have the confidence, or unrealistic or irrational confidence, that you are somehow able to take a human being apart and put them back together. And so we've made loads of small incremental changes, and after every single operation we say, what could we have done better? Okay, let's try that next time. And now we do 4 lid lefts in just over an hour, under local, people walk in and out, and there's hardly bruising.
Just we're in the business of medicine, it's very much a human business. And so the customer approach has got to be the level of a 5-star hotel or a 5-star spa or a 5-star restaurant. And we are the 5-star medics, the 5-star surgeon.
This may sound a bit corny, but I'm not that interested in aesthetics, and I'm not actually that interested in medicine. But I am very interested in humans and people.
Things that can be optimized for a business, which means that the actual face-to-face treatment and consultation becomes 5-star. And the follow-up also has to be like that. It's not just the 3-way WhatsApp, it's all the other communication points. And it's important to have multiple touch points in that patient journey with the whole team.
And so what I wish I'd known right from the start is that you have to be clear on your values, so that you're a values-driven business. And if somebody doesn't share those values, it's okay to let them go. It's not a failing. Welcome back to the Business of a Clinic. I'm here with Jonathan and Rachna, who are a bit of a double act, and you'll tell us a bit about that. But they are global practitioners, as I've already learned, and we're really excited to hear your story. So thank you for being here. Would you mind just introducing yourselves quickly?
Yeah, of course. Okay, so I'm Rachna Murthy. I'm a consultant ophthalmologist and an oculoplastic surgeon. I was an NHS consultant in Cambridge and in Ipswich in the east of England for 13 years before I left from full-time NHS work to full-time private practice. And my interests are not just about eyes and eye health and eyelid surgery, but it's very much a holistic approach to patient care, which is what we're going to be talking about, hopefully, with you, about why the business of medicine is really important for an individual practitioner, but also for the patient, and that involves holistic care.
Great, thank you. And I'm Jonathan. I was a Cambridge undergrad, a Cambridge grad, and then a PhD. So I've spent many, many years in Cambridge, and that's where I met Rachna. And I'm also a consultant ophthalmologist and an oculoplastic surgeon. I've had the pleasure of doing part of my PhD at Harvard in the US, and I've done a little bit of work in Africa as well. But now I reside in Jersey and have a large practice there, which I co-own with Rachna, and we also work in Harley Street here in London. And I just wanted to pick up on something Rachna said, which is that business is actually important in medicine. And when we started out, we were really fresh. We opened a Harley Street practice, and patients would come see us, and we'd say, "Oh, you don't have to pay. It's okay. It's a pleasure. Nice to meet you." And it was all very cute, but it didn't make any money. And if you try to do the best you can for patients, if you're not able to stay in business, then you're not doing the best for patients. And so we've learned from that, and now we try to run a lean ship. We try to put the patient first always, so money doesn't really come into it, but we do try to run things efficiently and well. And that's one of the reasons we've come across you, because you were recommended by friends of ours in Scotland, and we've really enjoyed having Coherent be part of how we maximize and improve the business.
I'm going to add to that. To be successful as a medic in business, you really have to put the patient first. So us two working together, we share the profits. We own 2 clinics, one in Jersey, one in London, and also are extending to the Cayman Islands and Bermuda, and everything is going to be 50-50. Now, a surgeon would normally say, well, I'm very selfish, I want to keep all of this money. Well, not necessarily selfish, but you're certainly ego-driven. And a lot of our colleagues would not want to share the money. I mean, you go into private practice for financial reasons, but if you can actually put the patient centermost and share the funds, actually patients come to you. And the team approach is really essential in business. Teams do everything better than an individual. We're built in second opinion, and it makes great business sense. Although at the beginning it makes very little business sense to share money, it actually is giving us sort of multifold return, I think.
Just to give an example of that, Jared, we've won international awards. We opened our private practice only about 6 years ago now, actually in the middle of COVID.
Great.
And
Perfect time.
yeah, and we within just 1 or 2 years, we were listed in Tatler for eyelid surgery. We are members of the American Society of Ophthalmic Plastic and Reconstructive Surgeons. We've had lots of accolades, and we've had some major PR coups. We've operated on some very famous people who've written about it in national newspapers, people with very large Instagram followings and things. So we've managed to establish a very profitable practice very quickly. But we did that by not focusing on the profit. And I think that's quite a good lesson. As Rachna said, if you focus on doing the best job you can for the patient and not the money, you'll come further. And as we were talking about before we started this podcast, Rachna and I do certain things very differently to other surgeons. So we operate together. That means that we are twice as fast without operating any faster. We're twice as fast as any other surgeon in Harley Street. We also are able to make sure that we don't make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, but teams overall, no matter how brilliant the individual, bar maybe Einstein, teams will outperform individuals in the long run. And it's, Rachna, I want to pick up on one thing that Rachna said, which was about ego. In order to be a good surgeon, you have to have a bit of ego, I think, because you've got to have the confidence or the unrealistic or irrational confidence that you are somehow able to take a human being apart and put them back together. If you don't have the ego and confidence that you can do that, you will start getting nervous. You will start shaking a bit. And you notice it particularly in cataract surgery where there are micro movements where you're changing the lens inside an eye. We don't do that kind of surgery anymore, but we have it in our practice and we're working in practices that do it. And when we both trained in that, if you lose your confidence, the operation becomes 100 times harder. And so you just have to have that ego, but you can't let the ego get so big that you're unwilling to listen or to consider that you might be wrong or to judge. You have to be able to judge yourself harshly and critically and say, what do I actually know? Am I doing the right thing? And we didn't start out being amongst the very best at what we do. I think we were good at what we did from the beginning, but in the last 5 years, we have become exceptionally good at what we do. And it feels good to say that because it's true. And we didn't get there overnight. It's been steady improvements. And if you work on your own as a surgeon, it's hard to question yourself because if you damage your own ego, you will potentially become less confident and less good as a surgeon. Whereas if you have somebody, if you're working with somebody, it doesn't become personal because it's not about me. If something didn't go right, it's not about Rachna. It's about what could our team do better next time? And when that's the focus, it allows you to improve very quickly because then you dare to innovate. You're not so worried about trying things because you've got a team approach. And so we've made loads of small incremental changes. And after every single operation, we say, what could we have done better? Okay, let's try that next time. And over 5 years, and over 5 years, that compounds. And now we do 4 lid blephs in just over an hour under local. People walk in and out, and there's hardly bruising.
So can I ask, so you've both touched on, and I think this is very interesting, sometimes when we speak with practice leaders who come from a clinical background and we start the conversation, the first topic is always the medicine. It's sort of deep into the medical. What I think is so interesting is that you've both hit on 2 strands that are in theory not at all medical. One of them is this idea of team and how that has allowed you to build a practice. And the second one is this, what sounds like customer obsession or patient obsession, which is thinking about the journey, the pathway. So I'm wondering if we can just double click on the latter point for a minute. When you think about patient obsession, this idea that we're going to serve this person to an extraordinary standard, far better than they would see elsewhere, certainly by comparison to 2 or 3 months in between a skin cancer removal, as you're describing earlier. What does patient obsession or customer obsession look like to you in your work?
Okay, so as much as we're in the business of medicine, it's very much a human business. And our business is about making people feel better. And so the customer approach has got to be the level of a 5-star hotel or a 5-star spa or a 5-star restaurant. And we are the 5-star medics, the 5-star surgeons. And for that, it's not just the technical skills, every single part of the pathway for a patient. And we put ourselves as patients, we put ourselves as doctors that were treating our family or our friends. And this is how we set it up. We got together and decided that actually we're going to set up a service where we are treating our friends and family. This is what we would want. And this is what's missing from what we were doing in the NHS. And it does feed into the team as well, because in the NHS, we're surrounded by lots of people. And an individual doctor who's leaving the NHS to go into private practice or doing private practice, it can be very isolating. And so in order to get the best patient experience, you have to have a really good team around you. So the two feed into each other. Do you want to add anything more?
One of my least favorite terms in private practice medicine and aesthetics is, a high net worth individual or an ultra high net worth individual. And it just sounds, every time somebody says that, and particularly in Jersey, people talk about this a lot because there are immigration criteria related to your wealth. But it always jars me because I think, there's nobody worth more than anybody else. And so it's a very odd way of referring to people. And I think the key to our success is that we try to treat everyone the same, and we try to treat them just the way we would want to be treated. And this may sound a bit corny, but I'm not that interested in aesthetics, and I'm not actually that interested in medicine, but I am very interested in humans and people. And what I think makes us exceptional isn't a nice lobby, or whether we have a perfect touch point or a perfect, a seamless thing. We try to be really nice and good, but the key thing is we take an interest in the human. And so part of our consultation is about getting to know the person, because if you like the person you're looking after, if you know something about, even if you don't like them, but if you know something about their life and their struggles, they're a human, and looking after them becomes a joy rather than a chore. So Rachna and I put every single patient that we operate on a 3-way WhatsApp group. They can reach us whenever they want, and we usually respond within, except maybe between 12 and 6 in the morning. We usually, one of us will be awake and will respond within a few minutes. It's not a chore because we know these people and we like them. When we first meet them, we ask them questions which they first might think, well, that's a bit odd, but we'll ask them, what's the name of your dog? What do you like to do? Who are you as a human being rather than as a human doing? And once you know about their kids, and sometimes these bring up, very difficult, traumatic things in the past, and sometimes they're just lovely things. We have people who are living the most wonderful lives, have been married for 60 years, and 4 grandkids, and that also gives us joy to hear these wonderful stories. If you like someone, or if you get to know someone, looking after them is joy. That's why even when, anyhow, I've talked enough about that. But so we tried to lead with love, and that's the corny bit. And that's how we started the practice. And that's why we didn't start charging people, because we thought, why would we charge people? Like, we're just here to look after people. Now we charge people, but we always try to be flexible with how they can pay. We try to listen to them, and also we know who they are as humans. And that means they feel that, because it's a feeling business, medicine. And that means that they will then send their children and their friends and their grandparents. And the reason we were a bit late today is because we operated on a lady who was very, very nervous a few weeks ago. And she said, I can't possibly have this under local anesthetic. And
Yes,
yeah,
that's right.
I can't possibly have it under local anesthetic. I must be put to sleep. But she was very nervous. And she came in, and one of Rachna's massive talents is that she has the most soft, calming voice and a very soft touch. And so she was able to calm this lady down. We managed to do the whole operation under local anesthetic, and
I'd call it hypnotic. While you're full asleep.
And that was a few weeks ago. And today, there was a man who's her uncle or close family friend, and he said, well, I'd already booked in with this other surgeon, but this lady, my close friend, insisted I come see you. She said, you must do this, and they're very good friends. So this man came to see us, even though he'd already booked in with someone else. And I think when you have that personal relationship, it just becomes so powerful. Rachna used to make fun of me because I used to ask, what's the name of your dog? But it's to remind us, it's not that we need to know the name of the dog, but it's to remind us who this person is, what's important to them. and I think that makes the job fun. And that's why we go into medicine. Nobody really goes into medicine to make lots of money. And looking off, also there's an element of trust. Once you know somebody and you got their trust, you cannot buy trust. I think that's a really important point that I just thought of.
Yeah. And it's a real pleasure to look after people. And it's a positive feedback loop. You're not just curing things, diseases. You're not just treating functional problems. You're not just making people feel better because they look better, but you actually give them joy. And the quality of life improvements with what we do for people feeds back to us as well. And they remain long-term patients. So it's not just a one-hit surgery, that's it. The WhatsApp groups are there forever.
Yeah. And some of them become friends. So we've had people come and have treatments in Jersey or investigations in Jersey. And then because they've been over and we've known them for 4 years, something, we've gone out for dinner afterwards. So, sometimes these lines get a bit blurred, but it's that level of trust and level of comfort and the fact that they enjoy our company, we enjoy their company. There's still a relationship of business, but they never feel that we are trying to push treatments or things like that.
It's interesting. You gave the example earlier around 5-star spa, 5-star hotel. All of these are industries that are very service-led, absent medicine, right? That they're just providing an experience. And then, Jonathan, you were just talking now about the idea that there's this almost a familiarity and easiness in the relationship. Many of the clinic leaders that we speak to, I think, would parrot that in that they actively seek to cultivate that kind of relationship. What we come to find is that is not such an easy thing to do. It's probably very easy when they're perhaps there in front of you, but more and more people over time were there in front of you, and that patient list, that patient body starts to expand. And so I'd be curious to understand from you, when you think about delivering this 5-star experience, how do you think about doing that? Very clearly, you've described when the patient is there, but then the patient is not there. You have WhatsApp groups, a great example, 3-way, always on access. I can tell you that is about as far from the NHS as one can imagine, where you send an email and the speed of reply is maybe 3 weeks. So that accessibility, that easiness of communication is one of them. How else do you think about delivering 5-star in the treatment and between the treatment?
We've recruited some really lovely people. So it's not just the two of us. We have here in London, in the UK, we have 2 people who we have known for more than probably 15 years. Rachna and I used to work in another clinic where these 2 people worked, and I was a patient in that clinic. And yeah, so these are people we've known for a long time. And the same in Jersey, we've recruited a really wonderful team of people who we then look after. And again, if you look after people, they tend to look after you. Can I just add one thing which I thought of before, which I forgot? Not all patient interactions are going to be easy, because our industry that we work in aesthetics does attract people who have body dysmorphic disorder, people have unrealistic expectations and things like that. So it's not always a joy, but when you get to know people better, it also allows you to see things from their perspective more easily, and it allows you to detect these people and know who you should not operate on. So Rachna and I spend a lot of time. There are other doctors who maybe spend half an hour, 45 minutes. We spend at least an hour, both of us, with every single patient before we do anything to them. And I think that's been super helpful. Had another point from that?
Perhaps you can think about it while I speak a little bit. So you asked the question of how to deliver this 5-star service, and it's not just the face-to-face interaction. You have to have processes that are at the highest level as well. And that makes things easier for the patient as well as for us as doctors. So for instance, things like even before they get to us, they will already speak to the team. They will already have a pre-consultation questionnaire. They will have things that will automate things a little bit more for us, but also direct our consultation towards what they want to speak about. So we can be very focused on the individual. We know exactly what they want. We have access to a website, for instance, with a lot of patient information that also feeds into the patient's pain points and the questions. And so those are things that can be optimized for a business, which means that the actual face-to-face treatment and consultation becomes 5-star. And the follow-up also has to be like that. It's not just the three-way WhatsApp, it's all the other communication points. And it's important to have multiple touch points in that patient journey with the whole team. And the patient needs to know that the whole team is there just for them.
Sorry to cut you off. It's so interesting to hear you describe the sort of the bringing together of process. Obviously, we're living through a huge technology moment right now. And I sort of wonder, in your view, you want to maintain what feels like and sounds like a deeply human experience. And you also want to think about efficiency in the practice. How do you think about the trade-off? I'm going to use the two letters that everyone loves using, AI, but how do you think about that trade-off? We're not going to sacrifice 5-star. We're not going to let the human being change. How do you think about that?
Well, one of the things you said earlier was that you have these hotels and things, but the thing that makes people enjoy hotels, they go back to, is if the doorman or the receptionist or the maître d' or someone knows who they are. And it's very hard to replace that human side. Having said that, we were having dinner with a colleague who runs a private practice here, a GP practice in Sloane Square, and he was telling me about a piece of research he came across. I think it was from the Mayo Clinic, which looked at, we always thought that we as doctors would be safe from replacement because we have empathy and human feelings and can be human with people. Apparently, there was a study showing that when the empathy of a programmed empathetic robot was compared to the average physician, the robots are actually better.
Right.
So our jobs may be replaced.
Possibly, but possibly not, because I'm going to tell you about a couple of sort of data points. So there was a report recently by a communication agency called Carla Otto that looked at how the whole industry in terms of fashion and business and hospitality is moving, and everything is moving towards wellness, and wellness will move towards longevity. And the missing point in that wellness, everybody has wearables. They have access to AI. AI is able to pick up on the data that the wearables gives the individual, and then it can give some advice. But actually what the consumer is wanting is they want to have the credible validity. That means that you have to have some science behind it. And that science is not just science, it has to be medical delivered or a scientist delivered. And so there is always going to have to be that human touch at a higher level that gives the validity to the wearable data, the supplements, the skincare, everything else that everybody is using in terms of biohacking and bioharmonizing. So AI is really useful. We both use AI because there are certain things that we can make more efficient in our business, and AI helps us do that. And we also know that there are limitations to AI as well. And I think consumers will also, patients will also know that there are limitations. But of course, you're in the remotest place in USA, for instance, and I'm going to choose USA because USA also has remote places and they have very little access to certain medical facilities, and they use a lot of AI there. But that has allowed them access to early medical interventions through using AI.
I think we also have to be cautious though, because AI does hallucinate. Just today, we had a meeting for lunch with a journalist, and she asked, I think it was one large language model, which tube stop should I get off for this restaurant? And she ended up in the completely wrong place. So I don't think it's always right. And I think one of the things that one has to remember that at the moment, AI is still in its infancy, and these large language models, they basically link words by probability. And that isn't always, it doesn't always give you the right answer. And I think one of the strengths of our practice is that, as I said in the beginning, I've spent a lot of time doing scientific research. So I have a PhD in molecular cell biology, and that doesn't make me smart, but it does mean that I question things all the time. And just because I read it, I think, well, I could have written that and I could have been wrong. So I think that's important. And I think people are actually, if I look at my own children, they are much more critical, and they're learning to be much more critical about the printed word. It used to be that, people would pick up and they said, well, it's in the Encyclopedia Britannica, it must be true. And my children, if I say, well, that's what it says, they say, yeah, but how do you know? And I think in some ways schools are doing a really good job preparing the next generation for questioning things. Just today, I saw something on the news. There was a video of one of my least favorite politicians, because there are many least favorite politicians, called Nigel Farage, having a fist fight and kicking the governor of the Bank of England during a question time interview. And it was completely AI generated and fake. As much as I may dislike some of these people, they don't usually resort to physical violence, and which isn't always the worst form of violence either. But I think the next generation is learning to be careful about this stuff. Just one last thing. I said before that I wasn't interested in aesthetics, and that's not so good for our business, given that we do a lot of aesthetics.
In aesthetics, sure.
But where our job is wonderful is not so much about taking the very pretty people and making them a tiny bit prettier, but it's when people come to us and they are manifesting an appearance which doesn't match how they feel on the inside. So they come and they say, people ask me if I'm upset or why I'm looking sad or if I'm grumpy. And I'm not grumpy. I'm really happy. I'm having a great time. But their face has changed to signal certain things. That part's exciting because you get to marry up how somebody feels on the inside with how they want to project on the outside. And that makes the job really fun. Because
this goes back to your human...
Yeah, exactly. Because if you get that right, you have massively improved that human's quality of life. So that excites me.
So from what we hear, and we're not obviously medical practitioners, we work with a lot of different practices. Some of the things that you've just said, I think resonate, and some of them would probably be perceived as quite controversial. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I just think controversial, which I think is usually a good thing. Actually, my own personal opinion is people willing to do things differently. Have you experienced in your practice, your outlook, which seems to be the result of your unique experiences, have you found yourself in any way in tension with industry? If you don't want to answer that, that's okay. But where have you sort of said, you know what, that's not right?
No, we had a hilarious thing happen the other day. We operated on a rather famous lady who is also a journalist, and she wrote a large article about her experience for the Daily Mail with pictures. She's a lovely lady. We've known her for a long time.
This is okay on camera, by the way.
Her name's Victoria Woodall. She does Pilates with Trini Woodhall, who does Trini London makeup. So she's got quite a large following, and she wrote this beautiful article about her experiences she perceived at having surgery with us for her upper lids. And she called it, we didn't call it, she called it the lunchtime tweak that will take 10 years off or something like that.
30-minute.
And we, because we're two of us and because we're quite good at this, as I said, we are able to achieve things in about 35 minutes where people can be back at work within 2-3 days. And she had some beautiful pictures where she was 12 days later, she looked like she hadn't had any operation.
Even on the day and the day after and the day after that, there was zero bruising. And so...
Yeah, so
carry on.
So we were very pleased with that. She was very pleased with that. The editors of the Daily Mail were very pleased with it, and it all went over. And then our colleagues in the industry, there was a young lady in Ireland who went online and did one of these Instagram posts.
Rage piece.
Yeah, say anyone who says that blepharoplasty surgery is a lunchtime tweak doesn't know what they're talking about, and it's a operation and should be treated with respect. And then
and expect bruising.
And older colleagues of ours, or colleagues who work alone, chimed in the comments, here, quite right. And when Rachna showed me this, we just thought, wow, like how interesting. Because if I had seen my colleagues achieving that, my instinct would have been, that's amazing.
Happy to do that.
How can we do that too? Isn't that great for patients? Wow, we need to ask if we can come observe them.
Yeah.
Because we've done that for a few of our colleagues. Like Rachna trained with a very famous eyelid plastic surgeon called Naresh here in London when he was at Chelsea Westminster. And he's invited us to go visit him because he's a very nice person and he wants the next generation of surgeons, which is us, to be even better than him, which is the right attitude to have. In fact, there's a beautiful quote by Leonardo da Vinci, which says, "Sad is the teacher who is not surpassed by his student." And so 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 our response to somebody doing well would have been, wow, that's great. How can we do that too? Or how can we be even better? Denying that somebody's doing a good job and that a patient has had a good experience and trying to say, no, you will have bruising. It just seemed so sad because there was no drive for self-improvement. It was rather like, this cannot be true and it's rubbish and these people are rubbish. So I just thought, like, so there was some tension. Do you have another example?
Well, it's not an example as such. I think you have to be controversial. If you're going to be innovating and you're going to be pushing boundaries, you're going to be doing things that nobody else has heard of. Medicine cannot advance unless you do something new. And every new innovator was controversial in their time. We working together as two consultant surgeons, yes, there are two eyes, but, initially people were saying, well, does that mean that one of you doesn't know what they're doing? And it's a very controversial topic.
Was that, or we must be sleeping together, because there could be no other reason why two surgeons would work together. And there was, we've had a few, and many people, like Britain has had a lot of firsts in medicine, and particularly in ophthalmology. The guy who invented the intraocular lens that is now used around the world, he was almost hunted out of the profession. So innovate, and the man who invented the phacoemulsification, the Hoover that's used to get rid of the lens inside the eye during cataract procedures, he was almost hounded out of the profession. And so what's been nice to see is that there are other surgeons now who have started teaming up with a male-female perspective, because we also find that when some of the patients are not so easy to deal with, sometimes they'll warm to me, and sometimes they'll warm to Rachna, and sometimes they will take it in turns. So they'll warm to Rachna for a bit, and then she'll say something, and then they'll turn to me, and then I'll pick up, and we're able to. It's also harder to criticize two surgeons working as a team, because it means that at least two surgeons thought it was a reasonable thing to do. And then there was...
Yeah, I think more and more surgeons are combining, not necessarily in the same specialty, but they are working together because it just improves patient care. And I think that actually the fact that people are now copying us is a sign that actually this is the right way forward for business as well as for patients and as well as for the doctors.
So you have a track record now of several years of doing
things differently.
Well,
that's what I wanted to pick up on, because Rachna doesn't always blow her own horn, but Rachna's innovated massively in our practice. So I think I'll take credit for us working together, but Rachna has revolutionized how I think about periocular and perioperative care. We sell in our Jersey clinic, we have a whole wardrobe, a walk-in wardrobe of supplements that deal with the gut. Rosacea in the face, inflammation in the face, which massively affects eye surface health and eyelid health, is controlled a lot from the gut. So we sell cosmetics, which you actually don't put on your face, but you swallow. Can you imagine that? And we use light therapies, and we have, and again, I'll give Rachna the vast majority of the credit for this as well. Rachna's invented a special substance that we use during and after surgery, which reduces inflammation in the skin, a spray, which we call Purifies, trademark. And we, what other innovations have we had?
I mean, the whole concept was basically based on our microbiomes. Microbial mantle is what we've trademarked, and it's improving the resistance and resilience of our bodies against invading organisms, infections. And our microbiomes are essential for looking after not just our gut, but our skin. And skin health is associated with brain health. Gut health is also associated with brain health. So your happy hormone, serotonin, is made in the gut. The more you look after your gut, the more you're going to look after your hormones, your brain, your skin, reduce the risk of disease. So that then goes full circle into preventative health. And that's what I said at the beginning. We're very holistic in our approach, not just because we do surgery and look at the individual as a human being, but also we look at the whole medicine of the body as a holistic approach, and that's evolving into longevity.
And so you have to be willing to innovate, but you also shouldn't reinvent the wheel. And one of the things I said right at the beginning was that we've been lucky too, and are also humble enough that we want to learn from other people. And so we haven't invented everything, but what we have done is we've combined things from the best. So I mentioned Resh before, for example. We use his secret recipe in our local anesthetic because why not? Because that's what Rachna learned and it works beautifully. And then I used to work with another surgeon and we've taken some of his hints and, you know, we've combined a lot of things. And then I spent a bit of time in the US. There are certain things that American healthcare is terrible at, but there are certain things that the Americans get right. And so we've adopted some of those or adopted both, in fact, some of those things as well. So we have a unique practice that is innovative, but also respectful of what's gone before, and that is willing to challenge the status quo in a gentle, safe way.
So 2026, I think we're in 2026. 2026. Good.
I haven't invented the time machine yet.
Yeah. So we're in 2026. Your journey as practice co-leaders has evolved already in the time since you started. Let's imagine that we sit down together in 2030 or 2040 or however far out you'd like to go, but some date in the future. And the ideas that are not confidential, the ideas that you're thinking about, the evolution for the practice, the growth of the practice, let's say half of those things have come to fruition and now are available to the public. And when you describe the practice in the next chapter or at the end of the next chapter, what will have changed? What will be different?
Well, I think the practice has to continue. So we have to start thinking about our legacy. And that means looking at how we can continue to look after patients without necessarily having our hands on the patient. And so we are looking at improving some of the processes that will allow us to do that work in other international countries, work in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda, while also working and looking after patients in London and in Jersey, and without a time machine, being able to cover all those areas. And so we're already thinking about the processes that are going to allow us to be in multiple places, but a lot of the things that don't need us hands-on can be delivered by other people.
I watched a podcast with Jeff Bezos, and he said something really interesting. He said, you know, people always ask me, you know, in 20 years' time, you know, what will have changed? What will be different? And he said, that's the wrong question because nobody knows and you can't possibly predict. The really interesting question is, in 20 years' time, what will be the same? What's not going to change? And what he figured out was that people will still need things delivered to their homes efficiently, well, but people will still want that. And so the things that will not have changed in our practice is the importance of warmth, confidentiality, high surgical result, high quality surgery, high quality assessments, good patient-centered care. Those things will always stay
Foundational.
Well, you can probably deliver some of those more rapidly. You may be able to deliver them in a different way, but at the end of the day, medicine will always be a feeling human business. And it's really interesting. There are so many studies showing this. Rarely do the patient, the surgeon might think they've done a great job. The patient may not agree. The patient may think you've done a great job, and the surgeon might think I could have done so much better. You don't always marry up the two. So some of the very best surgeons, what they're good at is not necessarily the surgery, but they can make that patient feel that that surgery is the best they've possible and that they've had an amazing result. And so how people perceive things is not necessarily the same as how they objectively are. And that's why medicine will always be a feeling business. Some of the most talented doctors, a good example is this show, Dr. House. That's very unrealistic because it doesn't matter how good you are at diagnosing diseases or saving lives. If people don't like you, they will not come to you. People would the patient who was forced by their niece to come and see us today when they'd already booked with someone else. They were saying they went and saw one surgeon before that, and they were so uncomfortable in their presence they couldn't wait to get out of there. And he may have been the best surgeon of all time, but he'll never know. And so it'll always be based on this human feeling thing. but we will be using Coherent a lot.
That would be the sixth of the things that won't change, I would hope, over that
No,
next few
I
years.
think communication is key, and I think where you've done really well is I haven't experienced it firsthand because I'm not a patient of the clinic, but what I've seen is that it's a human, natural, real person outreach. And I think the power of AI and harnessing technology in the future isn't going to be replacing, it's going to be enhancing. And so you cannot have a robot take over the job, but you can have a robot help and say, these are the key people to contact today. These are and then it can even start the call. It can dial up and, it can provide a summary.
We agree.
It can send a letter out. But it's the people who will win the AI race and the race of business in the future are the ones who keep the human in the loop, but also don't become sort of antediluvian or troglodytes, hide in a cave.
We agree. I have a final question for you. So one of the things we always ask is, you are obviously healthcare leaders. You are also entrepreneurs based on the work you've done. You may not think of yourselves that way. You do think of yourselves that way. You have become the sort of, you may not want to fit in a box, but you are now in the box of clinician entrepreneur. And that is a small but growing box. And so I'm always curious, wearing the entrepreneur hat rather than the doctor hat. If you think back to when you started, you already mentioned this idea of charging people. This was an uncomfortable thing. But if you could go back to the beginning or a year after being in practice and take the business, the entrepreneur knowledge, insight, intelligence, you've acquired practices, you're growing internationally. What are the sort of one or two things you really should have done differently last time around?
So when we started our business just after COVID, Rachna was still working in the NHS. I was taking the calls myself. I was booking the patients myself. I was booking the theater slots myself and the clinic room slots myself. I was taking payment myself. And it was a lot, and also not very confidence inspiring. And we also didn't have a website for about a year and a half of our practice, which was nevertheless able to pay us 2 consultant salaries. We didn't have a website. It was all word of mouth, a slow trickle. And I think what would have been good in retrospect would have been to have been more social media savvy, because a lot of people get a lot of credibility with very little skill on social media. There's a complete mismatch. People may listen to somebody who has no clue but a few 100,000 followers and completely ignore what I might say, with decades in research. So that's the first thing. The other thing is having a functioning website with high search engine optimization, and now AI links apparently, which are even more important. So that would have been good. The skills I wish I'd had, which I've learned only in the last year, is how difficult it can be to, when you're an employer, when you're an entrepreneur, you also become an employer. And when we started the business, we're quite like-minded in some ways, and doesn't mean we always agree, but we have the same values and we have the same work ethic. And so there's a lot of shared space there. And the people we hired, we'd known for a very long time. So it felt like we were running a team. Then we acquired a large practice in Jersey, which already existed with lots of staff. And I thought my job as the owner of the practice was to look after everyone, to make sure that everyone who worked there was happy and well looked after, and nobody felt like leaving in the transition. And it took me about a year to realize that not everybody who I try to look after necessarily tries to look after me. And some people may not share your values. And so what I wish I'd known right from the start is that you have to be clear on your values so that you're a values-driven business. And if somebody doesn't share those values, it's okay to let them go. It's not a failing to let people go. I hate to let people go because I'm a people person. And I never want to be the source of somebody's discomfort or harm or have a negative effect on their life journey. But sometimes the fit isn't right. And since we took over, we haven't actually fired anyone, but 3 people have left. And we were grateful that they did.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. Whereas before, I felt that that was a major failing on my part. And now I realize that that allowed me to hire people who are much more in line with our values and where we want to go. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's brilliant. I'm trying to find something to add to that. I think you have to have a vision. You have to have a mission statement, and you have to have your core values, and you need to keep revisiting that every few months, every year. And if you're swaying from it, then you're going off path. And so that, I think, is the first thing.
So we have to be willing to seize opportunities. So we've had, through my medical school friend, Cambridge, a guy called Jake, we've had now the opportunity to expand without much effort on our part into Bermuda and the Cayman. We've also allowed them to start doing other surgery in Jersey. And that means that, you have to have your values and your vision. And I was just going to give Rachna a compliment because she's been amazing at vision, seeing how we can bring new things, new technologies, new ways of working, new partnerships. There's a whole other skincare range that Rachna's helped to launch with the one I mentioned where you choose skincare by mouth rather than topical. Like, these are the sort of opportunities that Rachna sees where I might be more cynical and say, I don't see any evidence, it may not work. I tend to be much more critical, whereas Rachna is much more big picture. And so you have to have values, but you also have to, be willing to take risks. And
Yes. And I think the only other thing I would say, the most precious commodity after health probably is time. And we work incredibly hard. If you're going to become an entrepreneur, which we are, you're not going to reduce your work. You're going to triple or quadruple the amount of work. It's not something that's achievable through laziness. But there are things that can be optimized to give you that time back. And so there are a lot of things that you need to think about outsourcing and invest in that outsourcing of things that you actually don't need to do yourself. Like Jonathan was taking the calls, like I still do the social media.
we had no starting capital. So we literally left the NHS and we just started with nothing. And we couldn't afford a social media person. We could hardly afford it. Well, we didn't have a website because we really couldn't afford it. We were literally just paying ourselves to cover our bills. And so I think, now we're in a different position. So I think sometimes it's actually quite nice to have done this because Rachna and I don't often get the time to reflect on how far we've come. And I think we're both feeling quite happy. I can...
A bit chuffed. Yeah, but also look after yourself. Self-care is critical. If you are working so hard, but you're not looking after yourself, you can't look after your business, you can't look after your family, you can't look after anything else. So continue to remember those pillars of wellness for yourself. Get your sleep, get your exercise, get your daylight, and get your nutrition.
For Rachna to tell us that she has, in the last year, packed on massive muscle. I saw it the other day when we were operating. I looked over at her bicep and I thought, my God, that's a massive...
That's a whole lot of other story.
Rachna, have you been working out? And for the last year, she's had a online personal trainer. And it's just gradually just...
outsource my gym work to an online personal trainer I can continue to maintain my health and wellness, and we can continue to operate together for at least the next 5 years, if not more.
That's really exciting. Guys, congratulations with everything that you've built. Two countries? I mean, Jersey, UK, one country, one and a half countries.
It's a really interesting history, actually. So the Channel Islands are the property of the king because the royal family here are the Dukes of Normandy.
Sure.
And they were Norman Vikings who came over in 1066, Battle of Hastings, killed off the local Saxon leader Alfred, who had just defeated Vikings in northern England at Stamford Bridge, tried to come down and defeat more Vikings down here, and then was in Hastings and was killed. Which you can see in the Bayeux tapestry, which is going to be in the British Museum.
Is this from your Life in the UK test? I seem to remember some of these questions.
The Bayeux tapestry is normally in Bayeux in Normandy, but that centre is being rebuilt. So they're now bringing it here to the UK for 2 years, I think. And anyhow, so when you then had the supremacy of Parliament and the sort of, when the king no longer was supreme in the UK, and when they lost eventually to the French, Normandy, they nevertheless retained the Channel Islands. So the Channel Islands never became subject of Parliament here in the UK. And so it is very much, it has a lieutenant governor, but it's got its own states assembly, and it is properly the king of the flag of Jersey and of Guernsey. Well, not Guernsey, but it's the three lions of the royal family crest. So then it goes back to like Richard the Lionheart, these old Norman things.
So then I guess congratulations on 2 countries.
Yeah, sorry, I went off on a tangent. I think it's all the British Isles, right? But the Channel Islands they're part of the British Isles, but they're not part of the United Kingdom.
And then there's an extension to 3, potentially to 4. Some much better weather in your future as well, which will be very nice.
But also they are all British. So one of the great things is that we are able to work in all these places with our British medical licenses. Yeah. We've had to get new licenses through these, but they're all part of sort of the old
similar body behind it. Yeah. Well, it's very exciting, and I'm excited to see where it goes. And I'm also going to holiday in Bermuda in August. So if you're practicing there,
have you ever been before?
No.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
I'm very excited.
Maybe in the Cayman Islands actually in August.
Well, you'll give me your best recommendations for where to spend a few weeks.
It's a very unusual place. It's the only place in the world apparently where the coral reefs are growing, because it's further out in the Atlantic.
So the water temperature is not.
The water temperature is lower,
okay.
And so the corals are growing. And when I was diving there just a few weeks ago, there was a sea fan that I swam by that was as tall as you, as in it was 2 meters. It was incredible. And I've been diving elsewhere, and I've never seen anything like it.
We'll be diving there as well. So that's really exciting.
It's very cold. So I wore a.
Oh well, you're there now. I mean,
but it was like I had 3 wetsuits.
Yeah, with 3 more wetsuits or something. Or 5.
The instructors of the dive masters, they were wearing dry suits.
Oh.
Well, if they're in water all day, they might as well.
He sold me Cayman and Bermuda so that I could go diving again. In warm waters. This doesn't sound like it's warm.
But it's still surely in August it should be.
Yeah, Cayman, it gets warmer, and Cayman is always warm. The water there is crystal clear, and what's interesting is there's lots of fish in Cayman, but the coral isn't so great. There's lots of fish and turtles, whereas in Bermuda
the coral
is great, but because it's colder, there's not quite as many fish there. Not as many tropical fish.
Exciting.
Anyway, maybe we can get Coherent to come out of this and look on our patient population there as well.
We do work trips to Bermuda, no problem. That will be no issue. You will not have any resistance.
I mean, there are tax implications for this.
Yeah, that's not we're in no rush to.
Actually, no tax implications if you are UK resident, though, because if you're UK resident, you pay tax on your global income at your tax rate. So Rachna working in Bermuda doesn't actually reduce her tax. I live in Jersey, so I have a 20% tax rate, but I also have to pay on my earnings everywhere.
Yeah. It's a different conversation.
Yeah, it's a different conversation, but it's an entrepreneurial. It's very bad.
Thank you both so much. This is Jonathan and Rachna. If you are looking for 5-star, very personal, very direct consultation with a blend of male-female perspective, you will probably only find that here, and you can now find that in London, in Jersey, soon in Bermuda, and in Cayman. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.